After John's talk, we all know that AI is really everywhere. We use it all the time. We use it when we're searching Google. We use it when we're getting recommendations on Amazon, when we're figuring out what movie to watch, what music to listen to. And it's really changed our lives. But it's really not the AI, and that's really what's going on here. It's really the data behind the AI models that's really making the difference. The data, having all this data is really making sure that we can have enhanced efficiency in our lives. We are kept informed globally of what's going on in the world. And our lives have been simplified in so many ways. Think about getting directions with Waze, getting a car with Uber. Having data and AI has really made our lives so much easier in many different ways. There's also tons of apps now that use AI to monitor our health and even improve our health. And lastly, there's plenty of other benefits, but the ones I wanted to touch on today is really increasing accessibility. So people always ask me, am I going to lose my job to AI? And one of my favorite examples to look at was a couple of years ago, a radio host lost his voice due to a medical illness. His voice obviously was on the radio, so we have all this data. And so an AI company said, let's take that data and recreate his voice. So he could type what he wants to say and then be back in the air, on the air in his own voice, which is pretty remarkable. It wasn't perfect, but as AI gets better and better, you can imagine, how much this can transform the world and improve accessibility for so many people. So 99% of companies are recognizing that they need to create a data-driven organization. There's just too many benefits to using data and using AI in the right way. But if you look at how many companies are actually successful with this, it's about 24%. So of those, almost all the companies, 99%. So why is this number so low? So I started doing research to see what makes a successful data-driven organization. And I found 6 components that these organizations have. And John touched on the topic during Q&A of democratizing AI. So companies that are data-driven are really looking for ways to get more people beyond the really smart machine learning PhDs to be able to work with AI and use and create AI, because there's just not enough PhDs in machine learning out there if you want to really transform your organization. And there's a number of tools out there to help engineers who don't have an AI background still use and create AI models, and even people without any sort of programming background be able to use some of these tools and create AI models. These companies are also democratizing data. And what I mean by that is making sure that people in the company know what data is available, and also to be able to quickly access that data. So one of the biggest complaints of data scientists is, I was hired to as a data scientist, but I can't even access that data. It might take 6 months to get my hands on the data. And what am I supposed to do in the meantime? And so it's really making sure that people within the organization who need access to that data, obviously while thinking about privacy, can access that data quickly. Third is transparency. It's really being transparent to employees and customers on what data you're collecting and using, how you're using that data, and also with AI models as well. Like how do those AI models work? What are they doing? Having some sort of transparency into what's going on behind those models. Also, these companies are looking beyond traditional data at alternative data sources that might be able to help find new insights. We talked earlier about the difficulty in finding enough machine learning talent. And so many of these companies are trying to think out of the box. Instead of just looking at a resume and looking for people who went to certain universities, really say, oh, what can this person do with data? Companies are having hackathons. Some of them are ignoring resumes completely, ignoring college experience completely, and just saying, let me see what you can do with this data. Lastly, the organizational structure of these companies looks very different. And unfortunately, there's no one correct organizational structure. It really depends on where the company is with their data journey, where they are with their AI journey, and also where how large the company is definitely going to factor, but it's making data front and center, making sure there's a right place for data. But in the last few years, we can't really talk about AI. I think we've all noticed some of these weaknesses that even John brought up some of these as well, but there are so many challenges with doing AI right. And you can't think about AI and you can't work with AI without considering what to do about some of the challenges we've been seeing. So one example I mentioned earlier, my favorite example was when a radio host got to go back on the air after losing his voice. But that same exact technology was used in the exact opposite way, where if you think about CEOs and especially of public companies, their voices are on earning calls, they're all over the place. So it's really easy to take those voices, recreate the data of the voices, recreate it, and now let's call a report of that CEO and say, please transfer this money. So the exact same technology that was used to keep somebody in their job can also be used in for fraud. And clearly, this is definitely not the desired way of using AI, but it's something we definitely need to think about as it becomes easier and easier for anybody to work with AI. We've also been seeing other types of issues with AI that are not done maliciously, but just happen by accident. But for example, Amazon a couple of years ago had a recruiting tool that ended up being biased against women. This was not done maliciously, but they did not tell it, here are resumes of women, here are resumes of men, but the system learned it anyway. If it mostly was trained on male resumes, since that's what Amazon had, and so it learned that a successful resume is a man's resume. If somebody mentioned they were president of a women's chess club, for example, the word women's was automatically downgrading that resume. Certain verbs that were used more often in male resumes, like execute, those resumes were upgraded. Certain universities that were women only, that also made the resume downgraded. And basically, it ended up having the same biases that humans have, making assumptions that okay, if it's a woman, if these women aren't going to be able to be good in this job, and they're not going to get hired. And clearly, it was not the desired. It was not desired. They shut down the system when they realized. But this is not one of many, many, many examples opening our eyes to the fact that our data is inherently biased. And so it's really, really hard to create successful non-biased AI systems when you're using historical data. I'll give an example of also related to coronavirus vaccines. I think that's on many of our minds. I know it's on my mind. And when we first got the first doses of the vaccines, so Stanford medicine decided, okay, we want to prioritize the doctors that are coming into contact with the COVID-19 patients. Clearly, they're the ones who should get the first few doses when we didn't have as many as we have now in the US. But the exact opposite happened, unfortunately. They created an algorithm, and the medical residents were the ones who were coming into contact daily with COVID-19 patients. But those residents, almost all of them, did not get the vaccines, and they were really upset. This algorithm was a black box. They had no idea why they didn't get it. Later on, Stanford looked into seeing what went wrong with this algorithm. And there were a couple of issues. One was that the algorithm prioritized age, because we all know that COVID-19 is riskier for older people. And these medical residents tended to be younger. But there was another issue too. The residents didn't have an assigned location in the hospital. And so they were automatically ignored because it looked at where you were working in the hospital. And so this is just another eye-opening example of and I wonder what would have happened if they had at least one, maybe a few residents working on this system. Would they have, creating this algorithm, would they have realized, hey, this system wouldn't work for me, and maybe we could have avoided some of these issues. And that's something I think relevant to every industry, is thinking about, do you have the right people working on creating the algorithms? So where are we headed, given all of these issues and given this whole topic and the problems within AI? So I've been researching also what are companies doing to help with the issue of AI bias, and some of these fixes can also help with some of the other issues we've been seeing with AI. I wanted to talk about 4 strategies that I've been seeing companies either taking or figuring out how to do and talking about. The first one, companies are trying to figure out how do we bring more diversity into AI. I think we all know the benefits of diversity in general, but in AI, it's even bigger problem. It's much easier for a wide range of people to figure out a problem of an AI system. Hey, this system won't work for people like me, than it is for one just very homogenous group of people to figure that out. And so diversity is even more important. There are also plenty of open source and other tools out there to help figure out how to explain how your machine learning model is working, what's going on behind the scenes, even in the black box, like deep learning models. There are many fairness tools out there to try and see, do you have bias in your models? And all companies should be using these tools for pretty much every AI project. Many companies are also setting up ethics boards. These are, and it's not just about AI, really any technology issue that could potentially come up from any technology being developed. Having very diverse groups of people, people with subject matter experts, people with internal and external perspectives, people who could potentially be harmed by the system, having wide groups of people, people with ethics and legal backgrounds, getting together to think about the project. Should we be using AI altogether? And if we do think we should be using AI, are we doing it in the right way? And lastly, training. I think most companies today have technical training for people working on AI, but it really needs to go beyond technical, training people on topics like how do we have inclusive design during beta testing? How do we make sure that we're using best practices for labeling our data? And even measuring accuracy across demographics, all sorts of topics that should also be part of training for engineers and really anybody working within AI. One thing to think about as we're using AI and as we're creating AI is that there are some things that the machines are really, really good at today, and there are other things that humans are very good at today. And we should really make sure we're leveraging the strengths of each so we can get the best solutions. So I like to think of the example of a doctor. If you give a doctor a tool using AI or any other technology that can help them give a better diagnosis, this doesn't eliminate their job at all, but hopefully they can help their patients even better. A factory worker who may at some point lose their strength, if they had a robot to do heavy lifting, they can stay in their job, do the stuff that really requires customizing and thinking, and not necessarily lose their job because now they can't carry things. And so it's thinking about how do we use machines to help people and do everything more efficiently and better. So we're already seeing AI being used across our lifespan. We're seeing children learning from AI programs and robots. We're seeing in some countries elderly facilities that have robots entertaining the elderly. And it's going to, and it already is becoming part of our entire lifespan. And so we do need to think about, let's figure out some of these weaknesses and downsides so that we could really get the best out of AI today. And definitely open for taking questions now.
Great. Thank you very much, Sarah. Yeah, a couple of questions already coming in. I'll get to those shortly. I just wondered, out of your 4 strategies that you talked about there, is there any particular order companies should take those up? Are there any things that should come first or are easier to implement than others?
In terms of easier, oh, now I'm hearing an echo. Thank you. In terms of easier, I think training, there are already a number of online courses to train engineers and others on these topics. So that's really easy. You can even just leverage somebody else's training that's out there. So that one I would say is easy, and it's helpful because most people aren't getting this in university, especially people who graduated a little while ago. Now, most university programs have some sort of class on this topic. The tools are also pretty easy. I mean, if you want to create your own tool, that will take longer. But if you want to just leverage some of the tools that already exist for explainability and fairness. So those are the two easiest ones to start with. Setting up the board, I would say, and the diversity angle are harder. Find some of the strategies I would say that can help with finding diverse talent is actually use. We talked about the bad Amazon example with how using AI eliminated women, but there are other ways to use AI to help with recruiting. If you use it to, maybe a human overlooked some resumes, and now an AI system can say, hey, you threw out this resume because this person might have had a background you didn't expect, but they have all the skills you want. So go back and maybe that person would be good. So that's a way you can use AI to help find diverse candidates that you might have missed out, because as humans, we all have our own biases. Talked a lot about AI bias, but there's also plenty of human bias. And so I think it's harder, but there's definitely ways you can actually use AI to help bring in more diverse candidates. And then setting up the ethics board as well is harder to figure out how to get a really good diverse group of people, and also how to make sure you have enough transparency into the company, into how this ethics board is working, what powers they have, and how the members were chosen. So those are the harder ones, but that was a great question, and hopefully that was a good, understandable answer.
Good. It certainly gets us thinking. This next question is from Faisal, who says, on democratizing data and transparency, are we looking at an open data initiative?
So when it comes to democratizing data, you can't really go, in most companies, especially in the financial industry, there are so many regulations, and you don't necessarily want everybody to be able to access all data. So you do need to do this very carefully. You don't necessarily want to just say, here's data, anybody who wants it, go take it. It does need to be done very carefully and cautiously to make sure that only those people who really should have access to the data have access, and only those, I guess, only those parts of your data that should be available to more people in the organization are available. So I would say that we definitely need to be very, very cautious in how we democratize data. It's not so straightforward. Even when we think about ethical AI, there's so many trade-offs to everything. Being able to help figure out, is there bias in your systems, is much easier if you have access to all the data, and but then you have issues related to privacy. So you really do need to consider privacy as well, and all these different factors as you're thinking about, how do we democratize data so we can use AI? Hopefully that answered the question.